Good morning and welcome to Office Hours, the show where we answer your media technical production questions every single week. Today we've assembled a great panel. We got some people here that know quite a bit about audio, so if you do have any audio questions, make sure you get them in right now. Courtney, let's get started.
All right, the first question comes in from someone here on the panel. Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada asks, Native Instruments, makers of Izotope plugins and other software, has entered into a preliminary insolvency. How much do you rely on plugins, and what is your contingency when your go-to ones go away?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, that's going to be a tough one. I mean, Native Instruments not only owns Izotope, and they purchased them recently, but also the Plugin Alliance, which has over 50 brands of plugin manufacturers under its wing for distribution. And some of those are pretty big ones like Brainworks and others. It would be pretty catastrophic to see those all go away. I can't imagine that that's going to happen. I suspect that if Native Alliance can't restructure itself, that it will sell off different parts of its business, such as Plugin Alliance and Izotope and some of the hardware stuff. Hopefully these things will keep on going because they are really good brands. They make some great product. And yeah, I use them a lot when I'm editing and mixing music in the box. I'm heavily dependent on plugins.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think there's a couple interesting lessons here. First of all, the issue of buying software, plugins, ownership versus all the subscription fatigue that we all feel. And this is one of those issues to deal with. In other words, if they go away, my full Izotope RX suite I think I'm still in version 10, so maybe I'm part of the problem because I haven't upgraded. But I will still be able to use it. It's not a subscription, so it's not checking for a current account. But it's also a problem of innovation. The reason I haven't upgraded is because they haven't kept up with their competition. Their competition has made huge advances in terms of leveraging, quote unquote AI, machine learning, etc. Waves, Clarity VX. I'm not a big Waves fan, but they've surpassed what a lot of some of the Izotope plugins. I still use one of them. But luckily also there's no shortage of plugins. So, I mean, if there's anything that you're going to lose with this, there's plenty of high quality replacement. So, yeah, just be prepared that is always a possibility.
And Craig.
So talking about it as far as Native Instruments goes is one factor of why I put the question in. Part of it is also just, this to me is a bit of a canary in a coal mine situation as far as other software that we use and rely on. I work in a theater environment where we bring back shows that we've done years before and we rotate through some of them. Right now we brought one back that we last did 8 years ago. And whether it's the lighting board software, the sound console software, we've changed sound consoles, I think twice, at least once since we did the show last, and even QLab for some of the playback. The current version of the software usually is able to open older stuff, but not always. QLab being a great example. It's one of my favorite pieces of software for live shows, but I don't think I can open a QLab 3 file in QLab 5. So having the ability to see this now and go, how do I prepare for when the software plugins or the software itself that I used last time around on the project, the last mix I did for this band, for their album, if I can't open that project again, what's my contingencies?
Yeah, that's very true. Those are all very, very valid points. I'm a little fascinated by this. This really threw me yesterday when I saw the news when this article was posted, because it came out, I think the announcement was late in the day yesterday, at least for me here on the West Coast. And I looked at the company details on Wikipedia, and according to Wikipedia, it says as of 2021, they had made, I think their revenue was a little over 79 million euros. So I'm not sure what happened there. I know there was some controversy internally with that company, with past employees that have complained about racism in the workplace. So I'm sure there's more to it than just general culture problems inside the company. Obviously, there's a lot of mismanagement happening, but I feel like it's a very strong brand that's probably not going to go away. So who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure it'll probably get parted out, and like some of the people were mentioning here on the show, and of course other companies will probably acquire them because it's a really important brand. I think they make a lot of really, really good hardware and a lot of really good software, so I'd like to see them continue. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully report back as things evolve. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Portsmouth. We don't know which Portsmouth. Maybe Virginia, maybe New Hampshire, maybe Maine. We don't know. Harold Williams asks the question, the hybrid problem. What is the panel's gold standard for managing mix-minus in a hybrid environment where you have local presenters, Zoom participants, and a live stream audience all needing different monitoring needs?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, there's different types of, or different areas of mix-minus that you need to concern yourself with. The conferencing platforms, Zoom and others, do a pretty good job of managing mix-minus for themselves, by which I mean not returning what you're sending out to you. Only other people who are receiving that stream are hearing what you're sending out. So they do a pretty good job of that. But when you're mixing that in with live audio, with in-house loudspeakers, then you need to manage the mix-minus for your facility. And hopefully you're using a digital console or a console with multiple buses that will allow you to do that with different outputs that can have different mixes on it. So for in-house speakers, you want to bring into that mix your Zoom participants, your remote participants, but you don't want to bring in what you're sending to them. So there would be one bus going out to Zoom and another bus going to your loudspeakers. And you would only bring up what you want to send on each of those buses, things that are necessary for them to hear. And you don't want to mix things up so that you don't want to have that delay and that return and that feedback path. That is pretty much it. There are some automatic boxes that claim to be able to manage mix-minus. Some broadcast consoles have mix-minus specific buses built into them, but we're not likely to use them in conference rooms and for live events. They're more likely standard audio mixes that are perfectly capable of doing this job. You just have to educate yourself on how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no substitute for actually just learning how to do this properly. Because like you said, Marty, there's some products that try to do the quote unquote automatic mix minus thing. But it really empowers you when you actually understand how your hardware and software works. And when you understand mix minus, which is not really that complicated, once you actually figure out how that works, you'll be able to set it up properly every single time. Let's go to the next question.
There is something to consider, though, that in some applications, like teleconference rooms, for example, there's a process known as echo cancellation, and that is kind of a mix minus as well. It works in the digital signal processor. It listens to the microphones, it listens to the speakers, and it's a fairly complex algorithm that kind of cancels out the return audio so that it's not delayed. Again, but not something that we would use in live production.
Next question.
Next question comes in from Someone named Alexander Knight, our host here today from Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Alexander has the question. Thoughts on refreshed Shure SLX-D Plus wireless? Huge bandwidth upgrade, easier firmware upgrades, feedback suppression, control of transmitters from the receiver, and he has a link to their announcement yesterday.
Craig, do you have a chance to look at this thing?
I've looked a little bit at the announcement, and it looks great. It looks like the next step in the evolution of all the new wireless. A bunch of new systems from different manufacturers have some of these features. This is the first one I've seen that has feedback suppression in the system itself. One of the things that I like about the more recent Shures and a couple of other products is that they've got not only an analog output, but this one has the option to have Dante. It's not standard, but it is an option. And just an interesting thought about using that. I've done a number of shows where we'll use the main outs for the system. Dante out will go to a listen station, or with some of these, and I didn't see in the announcement, but I think this one might. Some of the Shures have a built-in, you link them, you network if you've got multiple receivers, and you can have it in a listen mode where you can only have to plug your headphones into one of the rack of receivers, and internally within the receivers, they'll give you a chance to listen through everything without unpatching your headphones.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, so this is an upgrade to the SLX-D, which looks like it's been discontinued. It does have a wider tuning bandwidth, meaning that you can get more channels into a single band. They call it wideband, but it's not wideband like some other products where you can tune anywhere within the usable spectrum from 400 to 900. This is not that. This is just, it still uses the familiar channel bands, but its tunable width is a little bit wider than it was before. Does add some really nice features like feedback suppression and other things. Dante is a really nice feature to have in these wireless microphones, especially when you get into the dual receiver and the quad receiver, which is really nice. You can get 4 receivers in a single rack unit. Being able to use the wireless workbench software is really nice because that allows you to do frequency coordination on a real-time basis. And if there are any interference issues, you will see them graphically if you're looking at your screens. It's always a nice idea to have that up on a screen during an event so that you can watch your frequency usage in real time. And the ability to change frequencies remotely is also a really nice feature. So it is definitely an upgrade. However, it's not a substitute for the ULX system, which is their higher end unit or middle of the road system, which has even a wider bandwidth, more channels per band, and some additional features, though it doesn't have feedback suppression. And I don't think it has, although I could be wrong about this one, I don't know if it has the ability to change the transmitter's frequency remotely, but
I don't think it does, but they did add auto lock and unlock directly from it. And I think there may be gain management, but I'd have to double check on that one.
Yeah, remotely, I think there is, I do remember that there is gain management available. So they're both really nice features. The ULX system is still about twice the price of the SLX. And, the SLX-Ds that I've installed were very reliable and very good. So the D pluses should be better. They should be.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a lot of success Canada-wide with these. We've been renting them at Long McQuaid. For the last couple of years, we've slowly replaced a lot of the older stuff, and it's been pretty successful for us Canada-wide. One of the annoying features, though, I have to say, when you have to upload a firmware update and update an entire fleet of wireless, it's incredibly maddening because right now on the current SLX-D line, which is now discontinued, if you update the firmware over your network to the receiver, you still have to use infrared direct line of sight, which means you have to hold the transmitters right up within a couple of inches to that sensor to do the update, which is excruciatingly painful and slow and really, really clunky. Usually what I had to do was, if I had a 3D printer, I'd probably 3D print something that would allow me to hold all my multiple transmitters at once. But usually what I will do is I will put the mic on an actual mic stand so I don't have to hold it, because it takes several minutes to have to hold it to the sensor to do the update. But now you can do these firmware updates remotely. It can be done over Bluetooth. They've got an app to do it. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. Craig, what do you think of the update?
I was just going to add one other thing that didn't come up yet in the conversation, which is just one thing I like about it. They have a variety of actual transmitters. So not only do you have the handheld mic, the stick, and a body pack, there's also a plug-on XLR transmitter, which I didn't see the specs on that, but they usually have the option for 24 to 48 volts of phantom on it as well, which is great if you want to use a regular, mic, or what I've seen a lot of people do is stick one of those at the bottom of a lectern, so you end up with a wireless lectern mic if you're doing a corporate where the lectern's got to be moved on and off stage quickly. And they also have a body pack receiver, so if you're doing this for like an E&G situation, you can you've got a battery operated receiver as well.
Yeah, and this is the one that you're talking about, the SLX-D 35 Plus. This is a newer product. I think they announced this I want to say it was NAMM last year, or maybe it was the year before, but this is still a pretty new product. So this is their plug-on transmitter system. The cool thing about these is they not only run on AA batteries, but they will actually run off of USB-C bus power. You can't see it here, but there is a USB-C port at the bottom. Can be cold shoe mounted as well, and you can run it off a battery bank. So it's pretty cool. I've also rented these out. These have been pretty good. I do like the build quality of the receiver. I find on the SLX-D 35 is a little bit nicer. One thing I wish that they did with the this new Plus line, I really wish they had refreshed the line of transmitters, because the one weakness I find with the SLX-D line, because of the kind of flimsy plastic body and the non-replaceable antennas on this SLX-D line, I do find that they break down a little more often. Not super common, but I've had a handful of these things break. The on-off switches have stopped working properly. They come back on a rental. Sometimes the on-off switch is pushed in, and then you can't really fix them because the body pack is glued together. You can't really dismantle it and repair it. And it's expensive to replace the body pack. So I do wish that they maybe went with at least a sturdier plastic, maybe even a metal body. But, I think they're trying to keep this thing to a particular price point. So the fact that we got any upgrades at all, I think is a step in the right direction for this particular product line. So pretty cool to see. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can I just make a quick correction to something I said earlier? Because I did finally get a chance to look closer at the front panel of these. From the pictures on their website, none of the receivers actually have a front panel headphone jack. So monitoring it, you have to put it into something else. And Shure did this with an earlier model that was intended for install stuff, and it was, of course, used by a lot of rental companies. And that's a real drawback, because if you're doing a show, you need to be able to monitor. If you've got somebody as an AT on deck running mics, if you've got a bunch of these, if you don't have a proper way to monitor them, it's pointless.
Yeah, and also one other thing too with the new quad systems, the quad receivers. The cool thing about those is that if you hook up two of them together, you can just connect them together with a simple Cat5 cable. You do not need an antenna combiner, so it not only is saving space but saving cost as well, according to Shure. So it's pretty cool that you can do that as well. And the Dante version is pretty neat at that price point too. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Craig Kadoki here on the panel and from Toronto, Canada. Has anyone used the Elgato Stream Deck Modules yet, the do-it-yourself versions? How have you integrated them into your finished products? And he has a link to them.
Jeff.
Well, I haven't actually integrated these. We are seeing it, which is at least a good sign. So I'm showing here, if anyone's not familiar on screen, what we're talking about here. They released this a while ago, and it's similar, but it's just these flat OEM, so unbranded, as they say, and they have some examples of just simple things, building it into a desk, for example. But what we just saw, which I'm optimistic about at CES, is this announcement of this new keyboard with it essentially integrated. It's a Corsair keyboard, $349.99 retail. It's still on pre-order. And so to the right of the numeric keypad, they've integrated various Stream Deck controls, some of the physical buttons, 2 knobs, touchscreen component with a lot of feedback. So this is great. Not great for left-handed folks like myself, but still great. But the whole reason I'm talking about this is because I hope someone who hears the sound of my voice makes a keyboard with this. That's all I want, is just a whole keyboard where every button is one of these programmable buttons, because I use different overlays for various software, and it would be great for it to be contextual. And when I go into different apps, all of the buttons on the keyboard are customizable. So someone please make this.
Craig.
There was actually about 10 years ago somebody who made a full keyboard that was all buttons like that. It wasn't those specific buttons, but there was one that was all completely reconfigurable. And I don't know what happened to it. It didn't last. I'm actually looking at this because I'm looking at creating my own devices that have one of these built into it. So I was looking to see if anybody had done anything with these, specifically with the Elgato network adapter. I'm looking at deploying a bunch of things around my theater where I've got a small interface box that's just on a network, and then creating a custom case for it. So that's sort of the direction I was going, but it looks like a really interesting little options rather than buying the full desk mount version of the button packs.
And Courtney.
Just a question for Craig is how do you implement the interface to like a USB device? What is the output of the circuit board, since it's really a bare circuit board on the back? It looks like on those modules, I believe there is either a USB-C, depending on the size of it. I think some of them actually have USB-C on them, or there's a pad where you can wire in the USB cable. So if you incorporate it, let's say, into an external keyboard that has a single USB-C connector, will you have to have 2 USB-C connectors, or do you just show up as an HID device and share that one instance of USB? That was
I don't know
how to integrate it into a separate piece of hardware is the head scratcher for me. I wouldn't know how to do that.
Yeah, I think like you said, if you're trying to incorporate multiple of these modules into one unit, that I'm not sure. If you're trying to just incorporate this into something else, it would need its own USB connection. And there's some on that website that I linked to. You can see where some people have made like wall mount panels or put something in a car as part of the dashboard, where it just integrates into the system as a USB device.
Guy?
Yeah, I know that JJ was getting into this because of some of the folks that he works with that needed these kind of controls. And about as extravagant as I get is I control a bunch of PTZ cameras and have 232s. But my compadre who sits next to me, who's a TD, he has 6 of them, where I'm just like, wow, man, it's pretty overwhelming. And he's got these decks, and there's some nice people that make these padded, really nice wood and encapsulated regular Stream Decks. But this guy is from QuickLink here, and talk about a custom integration. I think this is where the idea started to come from, as manufacturers like QuickLink wanted to build a control panel. So this is all Stream Deck integration, but it looks, it's got a panel and a joystick. And the other one that we saw at NAMM that got recently released, which looks tiny here, this is actually a companion compatible Stream Deck with a fader. This is $399. I don't know when it's going to be shipping, but it was announced at NAMM, and it's like, this is the size of a mouse. and there's the size of a mixer. So you could see how big that thing is. So I'm excited to see what other manufacturers come out with now that these things are getting into the marketplace. But like Craig, it's like you got to have a use case, and then do you want to custom build it? And they do have the CAD drawings on there. So if you're trying to, get it to fit perfectly where you want, I can imagine even somebody like law enforcement or somebody who wants to build a custom panel so they can, hit certain buttons and trigger certain macros that all go in a row.
And Marty.
Yeah, and there's different versions of this too. There's different sizes, and there's the version for OEMs that can build them into their own gear, like people have been showing. But then they have this series of small displays, rectangular video displays that are specific to the Stream Deck application that you can then stick on a wall or put on your desktop or put on a blank rack panel. Trying to find them I just don't see them on the website at the moment, but I have looked at these before. They're very interesting, and I expect that those would have USB connectors on the back of them, whereas the OEM products that they're making will probably have solder pads to integrate it, into a piece of equipment that another manufacturer is working with.
And Jeff.
I think one thing that's interesting about this question and about the future, particularly with specifically these Elgato panels, is like many things, the ecosystem. So in the chat, there's a lot of great links and examples of other devices that are out there. But again, it goes back to the ecosystem. So whether you I already have lots of things programmed and configured in the Stream Deck software that I could easily move over. I wouldn't have to recreate from scratch, but also just the world of all the plugins and everything else that is, again, part of the whole ecosystem is what either makes for lock-in or at least a lot of additional functionality beyond the hardware. It's what you can do with the platform and software with, again, all the plugins and integration and support that you may run into problems with when you're talking about other hardware.
And Guy.
And one of the things that got released today, a couple hours ago, was a story on the bit focus buttons. So, there's Companion, but now there's this new higher level tier that does even more as far as being able to trigger things on, like you would a cron job or something like that. And there's this great story that's online as of a couple hours ago that just shows how they're using the Stream Deck with buttons to control this show. And it's pretty amazing to see. There's an example. I think this is probably the old school controller, but you can see how they've made it more elegant inside of a broadcast truck so that it looks nice. So I can see, Craig, from your original question, making it look super nice and at the right angle, because if you're going to be doing this stuff all day, it's nice to get something custom and put it right where the operator's hands will be. And they talk about that some of the things that they make these buttons do for their TD or their A1. You got to watch it. It's actually a really nice video. It's called Bit Focus Stories. If you jump on YouTube and find, or I'll put a link in chat as well. But you can see some of the cool things. They're using a slim one here. This would be an example of it in production.
If you'd like to ask questions on this show, we still got room for a little bit. You can do that by going to askofficehours.global is the link. That's the QR code system. You just put your name and question in there. We'll get it into the show, and we would sincerely appreciate it. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Harold Williams in the mysterious city of Portsmouth in the United States. Wireless reliability. With the 600 megahertz and 700 megahertz bands becoming more crowded than ever, are you seeing better long-term reliability in the 1.9 gigahertz DECT space, or is it time to fully commit to proprietary digital ecosystems for corporate ENG?
Go ahead, Craig.
I think this is one of those, it depends. Certainly depending on the density of signals in where you're working. One interesting thing about this is that there's a There is a move afoot to go back to some VHF frequencies, as that spectrum is not being used as much anymore. So that's another option.
Marty?
So the manufacturers that are making products using this band are using them for their sort of corporate product line for conference rooms that are in fairly close quarters. They don't have the range that UHF wireless microphones would have. Remember that the higher the frequency, the more attenuation you'll get when you're going through walls and through air absorption as well. So they don't have the range that UHF professional broadcast band wireless microphones would have. What they're doing is they're breaking up that frequency band into smaller chunks so that the deviation is not as wide, because the audio quality in a corporate environment is not nearly as critical as it is in production. And so that allows them to do more creative things with the software, and the latency might be a bit longer. So there's some differences other than frequency between the different types of product using different bands.
Courtney?
Yeah, Marty just touched on really what I was going to bring up is the 1.9 gigahertz frequency is up there high enough. It doesn't penetrate very well through walls or people. So for wireless mics, for capturing wireless mics for E&G or for dramatic stuff, it wouldn't be near as reliable as the UHF, or perhaps if they go back to VHF in the 192, 196 area, megahertz area, that it wouldn't be near as reliable. And remember, DECT was designed for wireless handsets for telephone communications over short range, and when you're dealing with wireless handsets, because of the digital encoding of this, a little bit of latency doesn't really bother you because it's two-way communications through a headset. You're not amplifying it. You're not sending it out to a PA system, or you're not trying to stay in sync with the video image with a wireless handset. So those kind of delays and latency would be a big problem if you're trying to use one of these wireless systems in a sound reinforcement system where you're going to, where 60 milliseconds or 120 milliseconds of delay could really lead you into crazy problems with the amplifiers, with the delayed feedback coming into the people that are on these wireless mics. So I don't see them moving into that in a situation where it would be used for amplification, for PA. And in a corporate environment, you could use it where the antennas could be managed above a table, let's say, so there's direct line of sight to all of the microphones on a desk, where you wouldn't have the issues of blocking involved. But if you have a wireless mic that's in a body pack walking around on a person in a crowded room, that's much more challenging for the 1.9 gigahertz.
Let's go to the next question.
From Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, and here on the panel, is this a Cochran? His question is, any NAMM news? He didn't raise his hand.
Well, there's certainly been lots of stuff announced at NAMM. I guess, what do you want to talk about, Guy? You tossing the ball to yourself?
I'm not. No, otherwise I would have raised my hand. I'm just looking at some of these channels now, and it's definitely geared towards musicians. The things that we see on this IDJ now is a lot of stuff that doesn't fascinate the majority of our viewers, but there are some cool things like some Akai controllers, definitely lots of speakers. I was just watching this one on Smoke Ninja, a DMX controlled smoke machine. That looks pretty cool, and you do smoke bubbles as well. So that's pretty cool.
Cool. That is pretty cool. I'm surprised I didn't hear anything from Fender, because if you recall, Fender very recently acquired PreSonus. Now, they've announced that they're sort of going through a bit of a rebrand with some of these products, but the PreSonus audio line, the higher-end audio stuff, live sound stuff, they're apparently going to keep the PreSonus brand. It's a little bit weird, though, because The software packages, I noticed that they've already updated, like Universal Control now says Fender Universal Control, which is just, it's just weird to me. It's really, really weird. But, you know, there's a lot of things happening right now with consolidation, with bigger companies swallowing up other smaller companies. So it's not necessarily always a bad thing as long as those teams can continue to do what they do best and continue to develop good products. Because ultimately, that's what really matters is, are they making good products? Are they serving their customers well? Go ahead, Marty. You had something to add?
Yeah, I was reading something about that acquisition and the difference, you know, here in how they're treating the Presonus brand versus, you know, other acquisitions that we've seen where larger corporations buy up a smaller one and end up killing it off, and their, you know, the fabulous product that the smaller company made simply dies because of either lack of development or lack of interest or cost or whatever. But in this case, Fender bought Presonus like 2 years ago, and they've, so that there is an established history that that we, you know, have observed. The product has continued to be developed. Studio One 7 recently came out with a whole bunch of improved and new features. And so it does look like they are really giving it its due and not just buying it up to absorb it into their brand. Now, what recently did happen was that they have rebranded the product to be the Fender Studio instead of Presonus Studio One. But you know, it looks like that's an attempt to just bring it into the Fender family, but it does look like they're continuing to develop the product, which is great news because a lot of people were very nervous about what was going to happen to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if really, like I said, what matters is that the product continues to be good. I'm not a huge fan of the name, and maybe I'm nitpicking, but it's just that like Studio One, they've done such an amazing job, and I just don't associate Fender with professional audio tools. I associate them with making guitars and guitar amplifiers. So to me, it just feels like they've kind of shoehorned it in and it just doesn't feel right. But, you know, I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to try to acclimate to it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I didn't go to NAMM, but there, you know, always at NAMM, there's always a plethora of announcements of new synths and synth modules and Eurorack modules. They did come out with the ARP 2600 Blue Marvin at NAMM 2026, which is a salute to probably the guy who invented the original ARP 2600. And this is kind of a mock-up of the prototype that he used to create that original synthesizer. So you too can have a Blue Marvin that emulates a ARP 2600, one of the original popular synths that started all that synth sounds back in the 80s, you know. And
Courtney, who makes that? That's not a Behringer synth, is it?
No, that let's see. I think
it's own.
Okay,
so it's
Levias Smith. Let's see. No, that's a different product. I'm not sure who's making it.
Well,
it says a rare prototype,
take a look.
So not a lot of manufacturing going on apparently.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, has anyone else been experimenting with the Boxcast Mixing Station? What are your thoughts? And here's a link.
Yeah, this does look like a neat product. Guy, what do you think?
I haven't been using it, but I've been paying attention to what's going on because a couple people have alerted me to this over the last few months. And one of the guys that I trust is on Churchfront. So Churchfront did a recent, 8 days ago, did this tutorial, and they do a live broadcast from their church where they let you tag along as he cuts this. The big learning that he got out of this was don't use Safari. You definitely want to use Chrome to get it down to less than 2 seconds of latency. So he was saying that he could get down to 1 second of latency, and he really harps on the crowd mics and being able to season to taste. Because I've heard of front of house guys that'll actually go take their stuff out away from the room's so loud that they'll go out on the loading dock or something like that where they can quiet it down. And so when I look at this, I'm like, how do they hear in the room? Like, don't you need to hear the room? And they're like, no, with the crowd, it's so loud. It's better to just get away and hear what's actually going on outside. So I could imagine being able to get a decent mix from, 1,000 miles away. Our friend Brian Maddox does this kind of stuff. So I don't know what the cost is of Boxcast, but it's pretty fascinating to see that you could, mix from anywhere in the world as long as you have a stable internet connection.
Marty?
Yeah, and while it's possible, I'm not sure that it's advisable. Mixing house sound from outside the house just seems crazy to me. You have no idea what the actual volume is, what the audio level from the speakers is relative to the ambient noise, like the crowd, because if the room noise goes up, you need to bring the volume up so that people can understand what's being said or played. This is great for doing webcasts, however, because you're not in the room and you don't care about the room. You just care about what you're mixing for going out to the house. Mixing Station is a standalone product, and what's cool about this is that and you can use it with any remote service. You can dial into a local computer or a local mixer if your network is set up properly, and be able to control it from anywhere. What Boxcast is doing is integrating it into a conferencing platform so that you can hear it and see the program at the same time, which is pretty unique. To package that all into one product is really nice and innovative thing to do. It's great for mixing for live stream. I still wouldn't use it to mix in the house. Sorry.
If you like this show, we've got other shows on the network. You can find all of that information on our website. If you go to officehours.global and go to schedule, you'll find all of that, starting with Extra Hours, our evening show, which is a bit of a different format, but there's still opportunity to ask questions on Monday night at 6 p.m. Pacific. Tuesdays, we now have our Focus specials shows. Wednesdays, of course, like today, is our Focus on Audio Day. Thursday is David Paskin's The Rundown, which is at 6 p.m. Pacific. Great show and discussion about technology. And, of course, Friday is our Q&A day, and Saturday is our Q&A day as well. And, of course, Sunday is our introspection. That's our schedule. All right, let's jump to the next question, Courtney.
All right, next one comes in all the way from Tromsø, Norway, from Kjetil Gjerslasvold. Sorry if I murdered your name there, Kjetil. Do the client or talent on stage affect what equipment you use? Do VIPs, celebrities, or well-known faces cause you to use bigger, better, or shinier equipment than strictly necessary?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I think you use the equipment that's necessary to do the job, first of all. This might be a good question for people that are just starting out in the industry and don't have the money to afford the $3,000 per channel wirelesses. I guess now $6,000 per channel wireless. It's been a while since I bought wireless mics. The recording equipment. You don't want to show up with, your collection of Radio Shack from the 1990s equipment to record somebody who's famous. You will look kind of foolish. You want to, in most cases, this doesn't come into effect because the producers that hire the people to, let's say, do the sound or on your show, and if they have a big celebrity coming in, they will hire someone who has a lot of experience and the correct equipment to do the job properly. So it doesn't come too much into effect. I don't normally change the type of equipment that I'm using based on who I'm recording, because once you reach that level of professionalism that you're hired to do these jobs where you're interfacing with a lot of big celebrities, you're going to have the right equipment, and if you don't own it yourself, you're going to rent it.
And Craig?
I slightly disagree. I think there are times when you would. I've certainly worked on shows where there's been some very high-level talent, and the equipment that was brought in was not what I was expecting as far as quality goes, and but it was adequate for what needed to be completed. But at the same time, if I only needed 6 channels of inputs for a show that was in a large concert hall or an arena or something, just because like if it's a comedian in an arena, I'm bringing in something a little bit higher profile than as was put in the chat, maybe like a little Behringer.
Yeah. The next question.
Next question comes in from you, Alexander Knight, in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. And Alexander says, I've never rented walkie-talkies, but need to for a festival this summer. Last year, we had no comms, and it was really frustrating. What kind of frequencies are those operating at?
Yes, I've explored. Now, I found places that rent this kind of stuff, like Motorola and stuff. And apparently, you'd need licensing for this type of stuff, but apparently it's easy to get. Courtney, do you have any experience with these things?
Yeah, like you say, Motorola's UHFs, two-way UHFs are the go-to these days as far as rental companies, because they don't rent any of the cheaper stuff because it just doesn't hold up in rental. And Motorola's will, and they can program masses of them to the right frequency channels and channels that you're going to be using for the area that you're in. So usually the rental house will take care of all the frequency coordination, and they will have the licensing. You might have to have somebody on premises that has a license, but they're fairly easy to obtain, and they are licensed in the UHF band. So that's your best bet. Don't use the ones that are in the 2.4 gigahertz range or any of the open Wi-Fi ranges, because you're only asking for trouble.
All right, Marty?
Yeah, there are production rental houses that do stock walkie-talkies for communications, because every production needs comms. And they will, as Courtney said, provide you with radios that are appropriate, with frequencies that are appropriate for the location you're going to be working in. And that's important to do, because with FCC range, regulations and such, and particular licensees in different cities using different frequencies, you want to know that you're working in a good frequency band for your location. So just depend on them. You'll tell them, they'll ask you where you're going to be working, how many you need. They'll do the frequency coordination for you, provide you with the radios, and they are licensed when necessary.
Craig?
We use Motorola's in our venue. The one thing that I want to suggest is that if this is especially for people who don't usually use radios like these, walkies like these, make sure there's time for everyone to get acclimated to them, to learn how to use them. The ones that we have, unfortunately, are digital Motorola's, and there's substantial latency, quarter of a second or more, from when you key the button before you can actually talk. So just things like that, you really need to be clear about it. And as always, if it's people that don't normally use them, getting everybody up to speed on just the protocol of how to call and answer on radios.
Copy that, Guy.
Yeah, depending on what the needs are, there's different systems that you want. Everybody covered the regular walkies, but I was just on a show and we use the same things all the time. And I just can't reiterate how much of a blessing it is to have good comms, because in this production we had the client was on comms and they were taking off their headset because whoever had set this show up didn't take out the camera op, which I was running PTZs. So they were hearing our calls and they needed to pay attention to the show. And so this is a Riedel Bolero. This is the one exactly that we're using. So there's 6 channels. So you've got these 4 buttons on the top, but then you can have program feeding and you can season to taste your program, how loud you want it. And then you could latch if the person programming, it's just a web interface, they can say, this person, Guy, has the opportunity to press 5 and he can latch. So he could talk to the TD, while his hands are full. And there's little things like that are just creature comforts that once you use this stuff, it's amazing because you want to talk to somebody direct, you can, or they're party lines essentially. So you could have a grouping of just the people that need to be on those channels. And you could do that with some of the walkies as well, go to 2 or whatever. But this is with the, what do they call it? The full duplex and the quality of the sound. It's just amazing. But we have 30 of these. So it's like 120 grand in comms, but you don't have to buy them. You can rent them.
Yeah, and to bring in comments from the chat, Mickey McIntyre saying traditional analog CP200s are UHF. There are walkies that are LTE as well. So many options. And there was some other stuff going on. Vicar Natness says, get earpieces. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. All right, let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in from Harold Williams in Portsmouth. How can I prove that the front of house has the music too loud for a house of worship? Is there any standard for loudness, or is it just whatever they set the volume to?
Go ahead, Marty.
All right. Well, so different worship styles call for different volume levels in the house. Some are at concert levels and other are at conversational levels. So, depending on your worship style, you might, have a different target that you're reasonably trying to reach. But it is for when you're working with volunteers, you're working with non-professionals, it is really easy for that volume to just creep up over time and to get overwhelming. And if you don't want to overwhelm your audience, your congregation, because then they shut down and they no longer can comprehend or retain the message, which is crucially important for any kind of worship service. That said, there are some standards that you can research. I've put a set of links into the Mukana chat. There's the Professional Audio Manufacturers Alliance. There is the HELA initiative. There is the Well Certified Building program, and these all call for certain maximums of volume levels in certain environments, for conference rooms, for houses of worship, for concerts. In pretty much all these cases, the maximum integrated time over any 15-minute window should be no more than 104 dB. For most houses of worship, I would say that hitting 90, 95 dB is pretty much all that is called for. Anything more than that is, usually excessive. And then again, this depends on a particular loudspeaker system you have, whether it's well tuned and whether the acoustics are good. When a system is not tuned very well, you can have certain frequencies that are much louder than others, and that gives the impression that the system is louder than it really is. There are a certain band of frequencies from like 1K to 4K. If they're too high, the system will sound harsh, and harsh equates to the impression of loud. Right. So when your system is well tuned, it's more intelligible, it's more listenable, and there's a lot less fatigue. People won't complain about it being louder than they think it really is.
And Courtney.
Yeah, as Marty was touching on, there are OSHA standards that limit the exposure in the workplace, and house of worship could be a workplace for the people that work there. And it's, usually 85 to 90 dB over a period of hours. But and shorter exposure, they would allow 100 dB, let's say. But the thing that you have to take into consideration is where your speakers are located. If they're on the floor-mounted speakers or head-high mounted speakers, you have the congregation or the people that are attending the worship service a lot in the front row are going to be a lot closer to the speakers than the people in the back row. So you have to account for the exposure level for the people sitting the closest to the speakers. So if the speakers are flown up in the ceiling where they're more equidistant from all the people listening, you can achieve higher levels because you don't have to worry about the people that are standing right in front of the speakers losing their hearing or becoming temporarily deafened by the 120 dBs that you're blasting out in that really rambunctious gospel song that everybody on stage is playing. This is mainly
Go ahead, Marty.
This isn't necessarily for amplification of the spoken word, but for those houses of worship that have a big musical or a band that presents the musical portion of the service.
And Marty?
Yeah, so that's a really good point that Courtney is making, that goes, again, back to how your sound system is tuned and how it's designed and installed. If you have a really deep room, because of the laws of physics, people in the back row are not going to get as much volume as people in the front row. And if you're mixing from the back of the room, what sounds right to you in terms of volume is going to sound very different to the people in the front row. You have to be very aware that if you're mixing from the back of the room, you are farther away than everybody else in the room from the loudspeakers. And so the volume you hear should be the minimum acceptable volume, not the average or maximum acceptable volume. And to directly answer your question, what you're really looking for if you want to be able to measure sound level is a sound level meter that measures the decibel level of the sound pressure. So they are, a bunch of these available. There are 3 different classes, with a higher class being more accurate and more expensive as well. But you can see that, here's one for $19, here's one for $619. Pick what you're comfortable with. The more expensive, the more accurate they will be. And also, measure in multiple places in the room so that you can see what the difference that everybody is hearing.
It's also worth noting, just to build on that too, experienced sound engineers, because especially in Europe, when you're doing concerts, you have to contend with limitations with how loud you can actually go. So it's also important to mention that it's just targeting a specific number, like let's say 100 dB SPL A-weighted. It's not really an entirely complete sentence. Generally, professional sound engineers, they will use room measurement microphones. They'll have software like Smart, or even for free, if you don't have the budget for Smart, you can get yourself a free copy of Open Sound Meter, and usually use measurements like LEQ, which is more similar to integrated loudness measurement over time. And so, for example, a more complete sentence would be 100 dB SPL, 100 meters or 100 feet from the stage over the course of 10 minutes would be a more accurate representation of what you're actually going to be hearing at the event. Definitely having some kind of SPL meter is probably a good idea, but like Marty was saying, it's not always just the level itself. It's sometimes just the EQ. If you're boosting frequencies or accentuating certain frequencies that are problematic, that are really harsh, you're going to have a hard time listening to that. I had that problem, actually. I went into a bar, and somebody on the graphic EQ had bumped up 2.5 kilohertz, and it was just like ice picks. It wasn't even about SPL. It was just like ice picks on your ear. And it's like, let's just turn down that problematic frequency. So there you go. Hope that helps. Let's go to the next question.
Next one is a QR code question that came in from Koala 20. That's the 20th koala in Florida, I guess. Good morning. I have 2 PCs, an Atem Mini Pro, a Yamaha MG10XU mixer, a Rode Go Xlr, and a Schiit audio stack. What order or what equipment should I connect to the other unit? Not sure what other unit he's talking about.
Well, I've heard of Schiit Audio. They're out of California. I have 2 PCs, an Atem Mini Pro. Okay, so he's got a Yamaha analog mixer, Go Xlr. That is a lot of stuff. I'm not sure. You'd have to really specify what Schiit Audio product you're talking about. That's a hi-fi company, so I'm not sure how that product is playing, because they sell DACs, they sell phono stages, they sell integrated amplifiers. I don't really fully understand the question, so we might have to push that back to you and get you to provide a little more detail. Let us know exactly how that hi-fi product is, what you're intending to do in this setup, because I'm not sure I fully understand it. Let's go to the next question.
Next one comes in all the way from Hanover, Germany, and Hike Potter asked, thoughts on the Verum 2 open-back planar magnetic headphones for $499 for listening to music, not for mixing. They recently received a good review by the Honorable Curtis Judd, and here's a link to their website.
I've never heard of this company, but I've heard of planar magnetic headphones. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this is where going to something like a high-end local store or CES. Like a couple of years ago, I went and tried on some of those planar headphones. These are the hi-fi mans that were $7,000. But if you look at the chain, that's what's even more important is why dump all your money on just the headphones when there's more pieces to the puzzle. So you might want to look at something like I used to have these things, which are USB to analog converters, and just the sound difference of not playing through your device with the crappy DACs and using something decent, you get amazing sound. So when you're also looking at what material to listen to, there's things like Tidal instead of Spotify. Even in Spotify, you can request a higher quality download, so 96 kilohertz audio. But I look at these for $499, $349. I mean, they're fancy. They look good, but I mean, it could just be fancy packaging, and it's pretty subjective. I went down this path for years with Bryston amps, and I still have some NAMM CD players, and I had like a $8,000 system. So it starts to become super subjective, and you start to get into nuances with like gold wiring, and you can get carried away with power conditioning and all that stuff. So it's more than just buying some really nice headphones, but I would definitely suggest going to a local high-end retailer and listening to them in person, because you might prefer the sound of non-open backs that are half the price compared to these, or you might be able to use those for your daily productions as well if you get some like Biodynamics or 770s or 900 series.
Yeah, I mean, they could be good, but look at this. I mean, I would not want to wear these headphones outside. I mean, just think about how much attention you're going to attract wearing these giant, expensive headphones like that. I would feel probably fairly self-conscious about that. Go ahead, Marty.
Well, we see people walking around with Beats headphones that are like flashy and all kinds of things. So, you know, there's a big difference between open back headphones and closed back headphones. In production, we typically use closed back headphones because people out that are, you know, other people near you can't hear them. Open back headphones, they can somewhat hear you, but there is a real difference in the quality of sound that you hear when you're wearing them. Typically speaking, open back headphones sound more like you're in a room. They're more submersive. They're more immersive. You don't feel like you're wearing speaker cabinets on your ears. So they have a more open sound, a more natural. They're clearer in a certain way. And planar headphones are, you know, can be really superior. I mean, they have a sound quality to them. Whether I'll say they're accurate or not, more accurate than others, is open to interpretation. But I recently attended a shootout of about a dozen different headphone models of various price points and styles. And the one open back headphone that we heard was really, really different. And matter of fact, every model of headphone that we listened to had its own very unique, very different character from every other headphone. And, you know, who's to say which is right, you know, which is accurate? There's a certain amount of personal taste and personal reference that you're going to use for judgment. I also attended a couple of months ago the Capitol Audio Festival in Maryland, which is the largest hi-fi trade show in the country, and there were so many different headphone models and digital to analog converters and headphone amplifiers. It boggles the mind how much money people will spend on stuff like this for home listening. It really is astounding. When you're doing production work, you know, there's certain things that you're looking for, certain things that are important that you really want to have when you're listening to headphones as a reference speaker.
That's all we have for today. Thank you to all the panelists for bringing your A game, answering these questions. We really appreciate you. And of course, to you, the producers, who lots of people were chatting today. It was very lively. We appreciate you submitting these questions. We wouldn't have a show without you. And of course, to the incredible back-end crew that wakes up to put this show on every single week. We really appreciate the work that you do. And if we were to travel around the world to answer all these questions, according to the Tlaloc Traversal, that would have been 23,000 miles. That's 37,000 kilometers and 183 million bananas for scale. All right, let's jump into After Hours. See ya.
Are you really going to jump into After Hours? Come on now.
No.
Dude, come on. You can't say it if you're not going to do it. What's going on?
I got to go to work.
Everybody else
It's
has
for other people.
hours, and they can criticize everything we've said.
Yeah.
Behind our
Tradition.
backs.
It's tradition.
It's tradition.
Tradition.
But you can.
No, I could jump into After Hours in my
Come
car.
on. Come on.
Maybe I'll do that.
All right. Be safe.
And as the host, it's your
idea.
responsibility for
All
following.
right.
I
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. It was great.
I'm going to
Great
fall
time.
on my own sword.
Good to see you,
All
Craig.
right.
Cheers.
Take care. Have a good
Adios,
day.
boys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, back-end crew.
Yep.
Yeah, very much thanks to the back end crew.